Welcome to our divorce TV show live stream, Best Way to Divorce. And I've got a lovely guest with me today. And I'm going to be talking to Katy Harris, who is a family and civil mediator. And we're going to be talking about not just what Katy does, but also the divorce industry in the UK and what it's like trying to do things in a better way. So I'm going to welcome now Katy.
Hello.
Well done. Thank you so much for being with us today. And
thank you for having me.
My pleasure. And I know we're going to get right on with some really good conversations here. The first one is, I won't start with the usual, what does a mediator do? Because I really hope that most people got a vague idea, but I think we will bust some myths about what mediation can and can't do. To start with, I know I didn't pre-warn you about this one. I've just come up with it, and I think it's important to put out there. One of the myths I keep hearing about mediation is, you can only do it if you're basically already friends, and you certainly can't do it. Apparently, I have so many people say, my lawyer said that I can't use mediation because my soon-to-be ex, it's an abusive relationship or there's domestic violence. And I explained that having the option to go to court doesn't mean you should give up on actually what is, for many people, a much less traumatic and stressful way, providing you have the right kind of mediator. So I wanted just to ask a little bit about not just that you're a divorce mediator and you also do commercial mediation, but that you are quite specialised also in the kind of clients that you can help that some other mediators might not be able to.
Yeah. So I think the big question there is over the suitability of mediation. And I think it would be right for me to say that mediation should be the default, and the practice directions for the courts and everything else says that non-court dispute resolution should always be the first point of call. As we know, the MIAMS, so the Mediation Information Assessment Meeting, is the opening door to kind of the future of how you decide to manage your divorce. That should always be the first point of call, and a mediation information assessment meeting is done by mediators. And it's during that an assessment is made by both the clients and the mediator, whether mediation is suitable or what other alternatives could be considered or might be more suitable for that client. We can talk a little bit more about that if you want, but just, you mentioned domestic abuse. Well, first of all, I would love it if all of my clients were just friends. I would love it. I would say that less than 1% of my clients are friends. Most of them really dislike one another. Often extremely dislike one another. So, but our job as mediators is to help them to find resolutions, whether they like each other or not. My job isn't to try and make them like each other. My job is to try and help them to find solutions that work for them and their children, if they have children, and for them to maintain control over those decisions, because why do we need to take that control away from them? With regards to domestic abuse, this is something I feel very, very strongly about. There was an old school of thought which said, well, there's domestic abuse, mediation isn't suitable because we used to do mediation always in person. So, of course, we needed to protect a victim, and bringing two people into the same physical space when there's been a history of abuse would not be appropriate in many cases. So, of course, we said, listen, we're never going to take the risk, and if there's domestic abuse, it's not suitable. Post-COVID, I would say that 99% of mediators offer online mediation, and in that space we can, of course, keep everyone physically safe. We also are trained to assess for domestic abuse, and for me, I would say that 9 out of 10 victims or survivors of domestic abuse would always prefer to maintain the power to make choices for themselves than for them to have to go into a court, into that same physical space as their ex, and relive all of that trauma in front of somebody else who was ultimately in charge of their decisions. So domestic abuse is absolutely not a reason to not mediate, but mediation is always voluntary, although it's expected by the courts, and really it should be a default. It still remains voluntary for all parties. So if somebody doesn't wish to engage, if they're worried, if they no longer feel that it's the right way to deal with things, that's fine, as long as they're making that choice with an informed mind. They know what the options are, they know what mediation is, they know the power of it, they know what the alternatives are. As long as they're making an informed choice, then absolutely we respect that decision.
And I'm glad you said that, because it does concern me how many I feel people in that situation are completely not given a choice. They're told, oh no, that's not suitable, when it's just not true. But
And it's so
also,
dangerous.
yeah, and also particularly emotionally, but what I think it's useful to point out with the mediation, I always say, you don't even have to look at them. You can be in a breakout room. You know, if their
Yep.
behavior is stressful, if the sight of them is stressful, you don't even have to look at them.
Yeah.
And that comes as a complete surprise and shock to people who were already immersed into the process and
Yeah.
already spent a lot of money on lawyers' fees, and they can't understand why nobody else told them that.
Yeah. And so, of course, we have techniques where we can keep people safe. We can do what's known as shuttle mediation or separate spaces. So, like you say, when it's online, there's a waiting room. What is the word? A virtual waiting. That's what I was trying to think of. So you don't go into a waiting room where they are. It is just a space where you're on your own. We would speak to each client and relay the information to the other. Where possible, we always encourage people to be in the same space, because in an ideal world with our magic wand, we want to be able to empower parents particularly to be able to work together moving forwards, and in that safe space where they are on a screen in their homes, feeling safe, they're supported by a mediator. As mediators, we're neutral. They can also have somebody with them if they need an emotional support, provided it's agreed by the other party. There's many things that we can put in place, and those things are key to being able to help somebody, particularly a survivor of domestic abuse, to be able to move forward through that abuse, to be able to work through the trauma, and to be able to take back that power of saying, actually, I can make these decisions and I am able to do that.
Brilliant. Thank you for making sure that's clear, because it's a big message we want to get out there.
I hope it does come across clearly, because I am absolutely, we deal with so many victims of domestic abuse, and we really do look after them. Not because we don't look after the other person, but we know that we need an equal platform of support for both clients. So we will always, it may not be done, we have to look at things rather than providing equal support. We need to provide equitable support, so that then we've got two people on an equal platform to negotiate from in mediation.
Creating that safe, fair space, which is
Yeah,
not necessarily what you might experience in the courtroom.
absolutely.
You have specialities in child-inclusive mediation and trauma-informed practice, which presumably these are skills particularly useful when there's been abuse. But perhaps say a little bit more about that and help people understand, when they're looking to choose a mediator, why those are particular qualities that might be useful.
Yeah. Well, I'll touch on trauma informed first, because I think it links in as well with the child inclusive mediation. So, trauma informed basically means that we are trained and very knowledgeable and able to support clients where there has been some sort of trauma. And we know that separation in itself is a trauma. None of us as children said, I'm going to get married, I'm going to have a family one day, and then I'm going to do it all on my own. No one ever wanted to do that. There's a grief cycle post separation. So we know that we're going to be dealing with people who are traumatized for one reason or another, whether it's the breakdown in the relationship, the separation, domestic abuse that's occurred, trying to manage how to look after two children now you're in separate homes. We understand that there is trauma, and therefore we are trained, and how we practice is what we consider trauma informed, which is that we understand that people are going to be feeling and behaving in certain ways, and they need to, well, we would focus on offering safety, trust and understanding without judgment in a mediation arena, so that they feel fully supported, because the last thing they need is any additional stress and kind of trauma or triggers during the mediation process. So we like for people to feel that they're fully supported, so that they can get the help that they need. With regards to child inclusive mediation, that's a specific skill that we train on. So child inclusive mediation isn't bringing a child into the mediation arena and saying, hey, here's your mum and dad, let's have a conversation. It is, one, it's expected of children over 10, should always be, parents should always be informed about child inclusive mediation, because there is an expectation that the child's voice should be heard. Now, we're not popping a child in the middle of conflict and dispute and saying, over to you, little Johnny, you make the decisions. What we're saying is, I'm working with your mum and dad about what life's going to look like with separate houses, separate homes, and your time with each of them. And we think because they're having their time to have some support with it, it's important we offer you the same. So we're offering a safe space, a neutral space, usually when they're at school, and if not agreed in one of the homes where they're supported without anyone interrupting or able to overhear them or influence them, to be able to speak to a mediator and say, do you know what? I worry about this. I worry about my dad. He's upset when my mum's not there. Or, you know, I worry about what life's going to look like. I worry about whether I'm going to have to change schools. And, you know, what do you think about this? And usually we'll start chatting about Roblox and football and everything else. So it is a space for a child to feel. I suppose in some ways it's kind of a specific place for them to offload. So there's a counselling stroke therapy element to it, but I'm not there as a counsellor. I'm there understanding the impact, trauma informed, you know, understanding the impact that separation can have on children, the worries that they have. Additionally, from my perspective particularly, I worked for 17 years in child development, and a heavy focus of my work was on mental health and wellbeing. So I've done a lot of work with children, including special educational needs and SEMH. So that's my kind of area of expertise that I love doing. And I can't deny that I don't absolutely love chatting with children. They are the most beautiful, pure human beings. It's really nice to be able to talk to them. And that safe space for them also is protected. So it means that if they say to me, Katy, I want to talk to you for an hour about whatever, it can be football, it can be mum and dad, it can be mum's outburst, dad's outburst, whatever's going on, they can share with me whatever. And if they say to me, I don't want any of that feeding back to my mum and dad, we're going, okay, no worries. Unless, of course, there's an overriding safeguarding concern, which we do explain. You know, if there is something that puts you at risk, we would have to report it. But otherwise, this is a safe space for you and I. And we always ask as well, you know, we've chatted about this and you've told me about that. Are you happy for me to relay this to mum and dad? And are these words okay for me to use? And is there anything that you don't want me to relay? Otherwise, nothing will be relayed. And we are not putting a child in a space where they have to make decisions. We're not burdening them. What we're doing is removing those heavy sacks of worries and everything else from their shoulders. And if anything, unburdening them and saying, here's a space. This person knows what's going on with your mum and dad. They're not going to tell you what you need to do, but it might just be an opportunity for you to offload and share any worries that you've got.
Time and time again, because parents get so bogged down with the divorce that they kind of lose that sense of what is appropriate for their own children. And the number of times it's like they want these kids to make a decision of who they're going to be with, and I'm not going, that's pretty traumatic.
And it's really, yeah.
But is it right
and
to
it's
say,
also, oh, sorry,
I was just going to say, pick up on what you were saying earlier, because if they are, if you've spoken to them, even if there's things that they don't want you to relay, that knowledge can help you guide the couple to think about those elements with an independent person there who has with your qualifications to help them really think about, oh yeah, how must that feel for the child, without you having to say, actually, they hate this and please don't do this, because you've been specifically not to do it. So yeah, just wanted to get you to reflect back that it's, even if there's things they won't let you say, it's still incredibly valued that you have that understanding of the child's perspective, and you can bring that to the way that you help the parents make their decisions through the mediation.
And of course, what we can also do when we speak to children, signposts, and that's what we do as mediators, particularly in our assessment meetings and everything else. So, you know, if somebody does disclose that they are worried and they don't know where to go to, or they've got this, you know, they might even have a health worry, then we can say to them, then, you know, you need to be able to speak to your mum or your dad. You need to go to the school counsellor. Most schools have the ELSAs, the early, emotional and I'll get there in a minute. Emotional literacy support, workers within the schools. So there should be someone for them to speak to as well. So even if it's just something as simple as signposting, or even if it's just somebody that says, do you know what, it's okay to feel that that you're, you know, that this is making you feel sad, or, you know, it is normal, and, you know, you're going to have a house, you're going to have two homes, you're going to have a house at mum's and you're going to have a house at dad's. They're your two homes, and that's important. And the language that we use as well, the language we use with children, the language we use with adults, is hugely impactful as well. So, you know, just things like changing the language that we use so that it's less combative, and more collaborative, really working towards solutions as opposed to pulling away from each other. And we also know that even as adults, but certainly when we're younger and when we're vulnerable, I suppose that's the key, is feeling vulnerable. If you have two people in front of you and there's something terrible going on, you're going to run to the person that you think is likely to keep you safe. And you're not going to run in the middle of them and say, oh, I'm just going to sit here, right here. I'm okay on my own. You guys, you just do you. A child will often align with one parent because that is their safe space. It doesn't, there's no guarantee which parent that will be. It'll probably be that parent in that moment of when that child just goes, I've had enough of, I don't want to drink my whatever today, you know, I'm going to go and live with dad because he doesn't make me drink my cups of tea or whatever, you know. And it's a really dangerous place to be, because what we need is children who are supported by both parents. And then what you get is the allegations of alienation, and you end up with a parent who is stuck parenting on their own, and hands up, I'm a single parent, and it is bloody hard. Am I allowed to say that? Excuse my French.
Yes, of course you are.
But it is, you know, I never wanted to be a single parent. I never dreamt that I would be a single parent. And being a parent without the parents' support, my children are now 20, 18 and 14, and I've got 3 boys. So for me, I often question, how on earth am I supposed to know what to do in this situation? How am I supposed to teach them to be good men, because I'm a woman? And, you know, I lose sleep over that every day, because I didn't ever think I'd be doing it on my own. And you make children with another parent because you need to do it with someone else.
Yeah.
It's really difficult.
Well, hopefully that will continue. They're beginning to wonder the way that Mr. Elon Musk is going to make that unnecessary, but a mechanical womb. So
Yeah.
I hear you, having brought up 3 myself, and it is it's particular, and 2 of them are boys, and it is a big concern. But so do you feel that there's been an increase, or is it fairly static, the amount of children self-harming through the stress, and
100%.
also what percentage of parents actually realise it's anything to do with them and the way the divorce is being conducted?
Well, there's an increase anyway with children's mental health, and I saw that when I was working as a child development consultant, and I think we all saw the peak post-COVID. I think we're all still slightly traumatized, even as adults. You know, post-COVID, it was a really uncertain time for everybody, and I think we all suddenly realised we weren't necessarily as in control of our lives as we thought we were. So children's mental health in general, we live in a world that isn't really designed to be positive on our minds. There's too much to do, there's too many things to do, there's constant influence, social media, everything else. So there's also trends and pressures, social pressures, and social media pressures. So yes, I have seen so many situations where children are self-harming, where they've got suicidal ideation. And I don't think necessarily, I think the first thing to say is, if that happens to your child, of course, look at your own behaviour and see if there's something you can do differently. But it's not always, it takes 2, and sometimes you can't control it. And I think for me, what I often see is a child feeling that they're not important. So particularly where people are fighting through the courts, or siblings are separated, and maybe that child feels like they're not as important as their sibling, or the oldest child, particularly if it's a boy, you know, I need to look out for mum, or I need to look out for dad. Girls, again, they've got that, particularly older girls, maternal instinct. I need to look out for that parent, and they become the parent, and that is not okay when they are, preteen, teenagers, and it's too much pressure for their brains aren't made to parent. And so, and I'm not saying that you should beat yourself up if you've been broken by separation, because as I've just said, it's a trauma. I genuinely can say that being a single mum and going through my separation, bar losing a close family member through suicide, this has been my absolute hardest thing to ever deal with. And I was broken when my marriage broke down. I was absolutely broken. I didn't behave I wasn't my best person. I wasn't behaving as I would normally. I sat and I cried. My children saw me cry. I wasn't eating well. But I'm not going to feel bad that my children saw that, because I'm a human as well and I couldn't do anything different. But we've got to bear in mind, we've got to talk about it. We've got to talk to our kids and say, it's okay that mummy's sad. It's okay that daddy's sad. We always planned to be together, and we can't be, and things change. And it's okay for me to feel sad. Of course I'm going to be sad. You would be sad if you lost your favourite daddy, and whatever is age appropriate to your child. You'd be sad if your friend moved away. Doesn't mean they're not going to still be your friend, but they're not there. And these are, we have to manage our language, the way that we speak to children. But I think one of the worst things is to hide it. But on the other extreme, we have to not apply this all or nothing. We also don't want to tell children everything. They don't need to know the ins and outs. They absolutely don't need to know that. But they do need to know, I feel like this because, and it's okay, but not, it's dad's fault, it's mum's fault, or it's, I need to ask mum, or it's dad's decision. You have to still put forward that language where you are saying, mum and dad are working together, and the children need to not be exposed to the conflict, because it's not divorce, it's not separation that hurts children. We've seen studies have shown that separation in itself doesn't necessarily cause harm. It's conflict that causes harm, or an unsupported parent. And really we need to be applying the thoughts of kind of like the NVR way, the non-violent resistance, where we're looking at, who is there for this dad who's going through separation, who's suddenly not got his children day in, day out. Who's there for this mum who's juggling work and these children? Because separation is huge. It's not something, but you don't have separation leave or anything at work. So we're going to work, we're ploughing on, we're doing all this stuff. And, you're not expected to do that when you're unwell. You're not expected to do that when there's been a bereavement. And yet this thing that doesn't go away, we're plodding on and we're expecting too much of people. And I think we need to talk, we need to ask for help. We need to say, I'm not my best self right now, but what can I do? I say to my children, I wasn't my best self when I separated from your dad. Of course I wasn't. But that's okay, because I did the best thing I could do at that time. I'd never had education on what to do when you separate. I'd never read the book.
No.
There is no book. There's no book, the same as there's no book for having a baby. There is no book that says this is what to do when you separate.
It's there are various writings and advice and guidance, but they don't tell you the truth often of just how utterly devastating it is, and how you will be, as I remember myself, not the best of yourself, and the other parent will often not be the best of themselves either.
And you've got, sorry, Susie, I was just going to say, you've got two people who are traumatized, but normally not at the same position of trauma. So they're going to be on a grief cycle, they're going to be at different places. And what we see all the time is a breakdown in communication, limited communication, which isn't always a bad thing. But when you limit it, the context is lost. And so I always explain to people, you're now two people in a negative space because you're anxious, you're upset, you've got a lot of negative emotions. So as soon as one person says something to the other, it hits a filter. So I can say, I haven't seen Johnny for almost a week and I really miss him. Can I see him this weekend? Said with care, right? But how that's heard to the other parent is, I haven't seen Johnny for a week now. I miss him. Can I see him this weekend? The tone is gone, and it hits a negative filter, and you get to a point where it doesn't matter what you say or do, it's heard negatively, and then you get into this spiral where you're kind of like, then the sad parent saying I want to see my son is met by a defensive parent who feels attacked because they perceive that to be an attack. So they respond in a way that is kind of like, you're not respecting my sadness about not seeing my little Johnny, and they're feeling like, well, you're not respecting that I'm holding everything together right now. And so you just end up in this cycle, and you've got to find a way out. And as mediators, that's what we do. We work through the needs. Behaviors are driven by needs. We work through the needs and they're usually driven by an emotion. So what's the emotion? What is the consequential need? What's the behavior that's trying to seek that need? And how are we going to address that without the all or nothing, without the, oh, you can see little Johnny or you can't, but okay, how can you see little Johnny? When, where, what can we do? Those solutions, as opposed to the all or nothing.
Creating a co-parenting plan, which I find so many people don't bother to do. They might get the online app, but they haven't kind of put down those basic ground rules and agreements on how to communicate. So, and would you agree that if you can have a session with a mediator to talk about that, even if you don't agree on everything, but hear the other person's perspective, that's a very powerful basis to then move on to the financial discussions?
Absolutely. I mean, we do a lot of work in our MIAM. So the MIAM is the Mediation Information Assessment meeting that I mentioned. And that is a one-to-one meeting with the clients, completely confidential. We do a lot of work in there to find out what's going on with that client, how they're feeling, what their worries are, but also where that grey area is, where there's negotiation room. Because again, we don't want to be like a pendulum swinging from one side to the other. We want to be able to say, okay, there's a solution here. But also we're trained to reframe. So where something is said in a way that might not come across in the best way, we reframe it so it's heard better. We'll summarise when people don't get their words out, when we're emotional. It kind of goes blah and might not come across particularly well. So we'll summarise what's been said. We'll be able to work with clients to say, that wasn't how I heard that. I can see that triggered you and you feel upset by that, but that wasn't how I heard that. Let's explore that a bit more. What did you mean by that? What's the worry underneath your thoughts? And things that people miss, whereas you have two sides. And again, you've got the two extremes. You've got the let's put in a parenting agreement where it's rigid and we're never going to move away from it, which is always going to end in disaster. And you got the other side, which is let's just see how we go day by day. And you're like, no, because now you've got to communicate. And even if that works right now, it's not going to work when someone meets somebody else or whatever
exactly.
else. Then you haven't got contingency plans.
You need to put those boundaries in.
Yeah.
And I think I often find that particularly the mothers will bend over backwards to put things in and agree things that you just know are not going to be sustainable. And often it is what happens when they turn up with the new girlfriend, and you've given them a key and they can walk into the house. Are you going to be okay with that? And every time it's no. So, well, then you need to set those boundaries now.
And having those conversations that, as a very, very difficult conversation to have, when they've just split up, particularly if it's a unilateral decision, what will happen if and when, someone meets someone else. But there has to be that conversation around, what are your thoughts on whether you would and when you would introduce a new partner? What does that look like? Are there any requirements that you would like for that? You can't force them, but it's important to say, well, I would hope that I would be able to meet them first, or I would hope that there'd be some sort of structure to the relationship or time of the relationship before you do that, because it's usually what you want is what you expect yourself. So rarely are people that far away with the answer to that question. It usually is, well, I don't want you just bringing some random person into my child's life that you've met 2 days ago. Very few people are going to say that that feels comfortable for them. So it's about having those conversations, and we hold that platform for those more difficult conversations, and we help them to put in boundaries, but we also explore the what ifs. So yeah, okay, so mum has Johnny on Monday, Tuesday, and dad has Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then you alternate Saturday, Sunday. But what happens when parents' evening? What happens when dad has to work late? What happens when, you know, mum needs to go and look after someone's cat? You know, what if? Because for some people, they would lose their mind if the other parent went and asked their sister or someone else to look after the children because they needed to work or something. Whereas other people would say, it's your time. You sort it. Don't put it on me. Don't expect me to come and fix that, you know. And that's perfectly fine. Both views are perfectly fine because it's going to suit that family. But there has to be a conversation. What do you want me to do in that case? If I can't stick to that day, what would you like me to do? Is it that I find alternative care? Or is it that you want me to come to you and give you first refusal to have additional time? It's just a conversation, but it's a difficult conversation to have.
And I think it's one of the most critical to have as co-parents, because again, you're putting in those boundaries, you're hearing the other perspective, and you're not going to get that in court. The mediation is really the best and only really effective way of doing that. And then from that space of greater understanding and being more focused also on your children, being forced to think about the children, then you can then obviously do the financial agreement. And a lot of people still think, I spoke to someone recently who's been divorced, and she said, but surely you have to have a lawyer. And I said, well, they can provide some very useful functions, but you could do a lot of it without the lawyer, or just using them for some advice, or and sort of outsourcing certain elements to them if you need to. But essentially, you can sit down with a mediator. If you do your homework first, I always recommend people work with a financial planner who's specialised in divorce, so that they come in with some properly worked out suggestions and not just leave it to the mediator to help them guess at what is going to be a sustainable solution. Can you talk a little bit about this kind of myth that there's the lawyers who work out how you split the finances instead of mediators and financial experts, being a more logical approach? And
there's lots of different ways.
And structurally in the system of divorce, why that can create a very different experience. Can I just say, you haven't got a client shut in a cupboard, but there's a lot of banging and snuffling. Can you just so that we know that you haven't got a client shut in a cupboard?
I haven't. Was there a lot of banging and shuffling? My son just came in with the dogs.
Oh,
so
right.
My apologies if
that's
you could hear
fine.
that.
It was more
actually
before as well. I just know. Yeah,
I
maybe you went to different.
There you go.
It's just that you have a dog or dogs.
Yes, I have dogs. I have 4 dogs. So it was probably one of my 4 dogs. I have 3 children and 4 dogs because apparently 4 children wasn't enough. So my apologies if you could just hear the dogs and the chaos that is now 3 children as well as 4 dogs in my house.
Oh, that's fine. As long as we know what it is. Just so you know, you haven't got anyone locked in a cupboard.
I definitely didn't. Not today, anyway.
Excellent. So yeah, say a little bit about the experience of someone within the system, the current system we have in the UK, and to be honest, lots of parts of the US, it's not dissimilar, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing that's really important is that we do always, as mediators, we do always say you should get legal advice. But there's a big difference between going and getting advice and understanding what your position is and what the legalities are versus instructing a solicitor to act on your behalf, which when you instruct a solicitor to act on your behalf, you're essentially paying them to put your words into a piece of paper to send to the other person, and they're going to charge you a lot of money for that. It's always important that you understand the legal requirements, but there's lots of different ways. We would always say speak to a solicitor because it's the safest way. It's the safest way because you've got advice. But what you need to do is go knowing that you are paying a solicitor to act in your best interest. That is what they are doing. They have to give you what's in your best interest, which 99 of the time is going to be the other person's worst nightmare. So they're going to also have their solicitor who's saying, this is what you need to fight for. Your solicitor going to be saying the opposite, this is what you need to fight for. Essentially, you're building an army to start a fight, and that isn't the right thing to do. So I always say to people, go and get legal advice and ask the question, what would be my absolute best case scenario here? And what would be my worst case scenario? And know that you've got to fit somewhere in the middle. Let's move away those two extremes on the outside of both of those sides and sit somewhere in the middle, because ultimately my job as a mediator is to move people closer to a resolution. Solicitors, you might turn up at solicitors and you're here, but then you're going to end up being pulled further and further away if you're listening to what's in your best interest, which is understandable because that's the job of a solicitor. With regards to finance and anything else, we can do financial disclosure. It just means that you do it without having to pay the costs, and you're not asking a solicitor to check whether bank statement for HSBC current account has the balance of 59 pence on it, and that's evident as the same on the written disclosure as to what is the balance. You can do that yourselves. That's our view. Of course, when you've got complex finances, you're going to need additional people, but we work on a lower level and we work our way up. So depending on the complexity of the case will depend on what additional support or signposting that you're going to need, to the furthest extreme that you're going to need a forensic accountant to look through if you think there's hidden money. But you don't start off on that point. You start off with the lowest level that you need, which is basic legal advice. You attend a MIAM. The MIAM is there to work out what options are available to you, whether it's mediation, arbitration, solicitors, litigation, or solicitors supporting mediation, early neutral evaluation, all of the shuns. So basically, all the options available, that's what the MIAM is for. The MIAM is for what is available to you, what might that look like, what is the timeline for that, what is the cost, what is the suitability of that, all of those options. I think what's important to remember is the court is a public arena. It's public funded. It is there as a last resort where you cannot privately find out solutions to your private matters, how you best deal with your children. You wouldn't, because you go to court, it's a judge, it's a stranger. It's actually more likely to probably be a magistrate, and a magistrate is someone like you and I, Susie. I mean, predominantly, funny enough, white, British, middle-class woman, which means that you've got a skewed way of finding things out, but they are just people. Obviously, I've got a law degree, but I don't, to be a magistrate, you don't need anything like that. You are just a person who can give up 17 days a year unpaid to sit in a court and make decisions for people. So do you want that? Would you go out onto the street and say, hey, what do you think? Do you think Jeff and I should have a baby? What are your thoughts? You never asked anyone about these things before you separated. So why are you suddenly asking strangers now what to do for your children? And hey, Josh down the road, what do you reckon? Shall I go buy this house? You didn't do that. You didn't do it before. Why would you do it now? There's no reason to legalise a process that's not a legal process. And children are not a legal matter unless there is a safeguarding concern. You're talking social services level, then it's a private matter and it needs to remain a private matter. So unless you cross over into a criminal arena or public law where there's such serious safeguarding concerns, it needs to remain private. It's your private matter. Keep control, keep the decisions, ask for help to help you find solutions to those decisions with a professional. You can attend mediation even with a solicitor if you want to, if you feel there's a need to, and of course if you've got bags of money. But we work on the premise that, and I would say that most mediators do, we work on the premise that let's keep your costs down as low as we can. We need to signpost where necessary. We'll tell you where it's essential. We'll also tell you where it's desirable. These are all of your options, and that's what our job as mediators is to do, to kind of help you find out what is the right way forward.
And just massively reduce the amount of legal time required to when and if it's necessary. But they're coming to that point. People should be very careful which mediator, definitely in the mediators, but also which lawyers they work with, because
Mhm.
there's lawyers with very different viewpoints on how the divorce process can be managed.
Mhm.
We're both part of the Amicable Divorce Network in
Yeah.
the UK version, and it's completely unique, where all the lawyers have to be genuinely committed to stay out of court divorce,
Yeah.
and that's if they're not, they don't get to be part or stay in the network, and there is nowhere else that happens
Mhm.
to my knowledge. So we're both part of that, and so when you if you're listening, if any lawyers are listening to this who maybe not have heard of this network, and maybe they're feeling uncomfortable about the very toxic system that they're part
Mhm.
of, because I know there are many who are very uncomfortable with it and sometimes feel
Yeah.
quite powerless, what
Mhm.
would be the message that you would give them? And also there's a fantastic event coming up next year which they could come along to and find out even more.
Is that the conference that you're talking about,
It
Susie?
is the
Okay.
and can I just position this actually, because one of the things I think is so exciting about you running this is that my experience of many mediators is, fair play to them, they're the usual process is they wait till a lawyer refers someone to them. They're not the real gatekeepers of the process, whereas you're one of I think a growing band of mediators who are going, actually no, people should be coming to us first,
Mhm.
and you're even
Yeah.
going as far as running a fantastic conference with the
Yeah.
Amicable Divorce Network to help people understand that there really are better ways to do this.
Yeah. There are definitely better ways. So I have my finger in way too many pies. So, as well as I'm incredibly child focused, and as I said earlier, I'm a separated mum. I've been through the system. I've seen the harm. I watched all three of my children change from the resilient boys that they were to become quite broken and vulnerable and fragile, as I did watch myself also. So, my view is I can't turn back time. I can't change what happened. I tried to keep everything out of the courts at that time, and it wasn't possible. So my view is that people need to understand, because even with my law degree, I didn't know what I was doing when I got divorced. I didn't expect it to happen. I didn't know what to do when everything went really badly, when allegations started coming in. I didn't know how to manage them. So, in an absolute state of panic, I was kind of like, what do I need to do? And I was navigating. I was basically wandering around in a dark room trying to find a door to get out, and I didn't know how to do it. So I think what we need to understand is the default is not let's go to court. And unfortunately, we've fallen into that in society, where people think, like you say, people think, who's the first person you go to when you separate? Oh, a divorce lawyer. No. And I know so many solicitors, so many divorce lawyers who have said, this isn't what I signed up for. It is now all about the money, all about the targets we're given. It's all about the charges for the client. I sat in a court last week in our mediation room. We're on a court pilot project where we've got mediators situated in court, and a barrister came in to me, and his words were, oh, well, I might be able to send my case to you for you to help them to find a resolution, but ultimately I'm here as counsel and we're here to fight. And I didn't put my head in my hands at that point because it didn't feel appropriate, but I wanted to, because why does money make the world go round? You're in court, and actually your duty is to provide for the court and for the child. Your duty actually isn't to fight for your client, but ultimately, as a barrister, you're not going to get any work if you don't fight for your client and win. You're not going to have the reputation that people are going to choose in future. But our ways shouldn't be dictated to by who can throw the most amount of money or pay for the best barrister. It needs to be, how do we make sustainable solutions? Because what we also know is there's all these cases going to court, and the court orders are put in place, but they fail. Every time they fail, not every time, but so many of them fail. And then you get stuck in this cycle of litigation going back round in circles to court. And all that time, these children are being harmed and harmed and harmed because mum and dad are now so deep in conflict and hatred that they're now probably never going to be able to manage things. So yeah, my view is I think we need to change the information that public are given. I think people need to know that lawyer is not the first person to go to. a mediator for a MIAM is the first place to go to understand what your options are. It's an hour's meeting. It's usually between £100 and £150. I can tell you now, provided you choose a good mediator, it's going to be the best £100, £150 you spend, because you are going to get all the information. You can go around the houses, you can speak to citizens' advice, you can phone up these people, you can get free legal advice and everything else, but you will not get what you get in that MIAM out of anyone else, and certainly for not that amount of money. Additionally, there's the Family Mediation Voucher, which shows also, that's from the Ministry of Justice, which I think tells you how successful mediation is and how unsuccessful the judicial system is, because the courts can't cope. They're not able to deal with the underlying matters. They're only able to stick a solution on it, which is often not sustainable. So there's funding available to be able to mediate around children's matters, given to anyone in the UK. It's not means tested for any discussions around children's matters. The statistics are that 69% of cases for children's matters are resolved, or at least partially resolved, in mediation. So you're talking just less than 70%. Which
massive. When you know
huge.
These are not friends. These people are angry.
I promise you, my life would be I would have less wrinkles and my blood pressure would be a lot less if my clients were all friends and nice to one another. But sadly, I don't have that luxury of having clients who are always nice to one another. Generally, they really, really dislike each other. And I understand that. Of course, you're not going to like the other person, because you are suddenly not in control and they've hurt you and you're feeling hurt and you're feeling wounded. And of course, that's how you're going to feel. But you have to find a way to move on and heal from that over time to be able to work towards those solutions. I don't know if I went off on a tangent just then.
Well, I'm going to bring you back.
Susie.
It was a useful tangent, but I'm going to bring you back to, and with the financial aspect of the mediation, there is you can get some legal aid for that, can't you, if you're low income, for mediation?
So legal aid is also available. There's legal aid through for litigation through the courts process, and for solicitors has a twofold test, that it's means tested, so i.e. financial, and there needs to be evidence of domestic abuse. In mediation, it's merely means tested, so you can access legally aided mediation if you are in receipt of certain benefits and you don't have so much in the bank or in a house. But I personally don't deal with legal aid mediation, so I can't give you all of the answers on that, but I can tell you that it does exist. And if you wanted to find a legal aid mediator, you can go onto the Family Mediation Council website, where you can find any mediators. You can see whether they're accredited, or if they're working towards accreditation. You can find out whether they're child inclusive. You can find out if they offer legal aid. You can tick a box and it will show you all of the legal aid mediators in your area. Or if you want child inclusive, tick a box, it will show you all of the child inclusive mediators in your area.
Well, come and talk to me, and I'll put you in the right direction. But that's good for me to know. So you if someone with the children cases, they can whether they don't have to be on a low income, they can get some financial support to come and resolve those using mediation with you. That's fantastic to know.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so but on that note of the current system we've got this wonderful event that you're putting on. What will the lawyers and other divorce professionals, because it's a very holistic range that we have as part of the network.
Absolutely.
What are they going to get at this event, and why should they be using the legal funds from their firm to pay for them to have a fantastic
Why? Wow. They should, because I've worked really hard on this. So Susie, myself and Tracy Ann Moore from the Amicable Divorce Network are co-hosting a conference in March next year, the 19th and 20th. There's lots of conferences for us in the legal arena. So the Family Mediation Association puts on theirs, the Family Mediation Council, Resolution have theirs. Lots and lots of people offer them, but as you just said, I'm not aligned with anything particularly. So my view is that this needs to offer support for anyone who is in this area of work: financial planners, divorce specialists, divorce coaches, lawyers, barristers, judges, everybody, because what we're looking at is where our system is failing, where those gaps are allowing children and families to suffer from harm and what we can do better to make that work. So the other reason why you should come is because I have worked incredibly hard to get the most phenomenal lineup of speakers that we could have at an event. So we have, in no particular order, we have Sir Andrew McFarlane, who is the head of the whole of the Family Division of England and Wales. He will be attending and speaking at the conference. We have got Bill Eddy from the High Conflict Institute, along with his colleague Megan Hunter. If you've heard of the Biff books, or anyone who works with psychology and conflict, then you will absolutely know about Bill Eddy. And then we've also got Professor Anne Barlow and Jan Ewing from, they're both law professionals and professors from the university's done a lot of work on alienation. We've got Penny Ruth Willis, who specialises also in NVR, so non-violent resistance, as I said before. Ben Hine, who's an expert in alienation. We've got myself and Tracy. Obviously, we have expertise in our own areas. We have got Gigi, I want to say Gutierrez, but I'm not sure if that's exactly how I pronounce her surname. She is phenomenal. She does an awful lot of work on breaking the school to prison pipeline, so where children are, where a lot of those ACEs are kind of available, so the adverse childhood experiences, which means that they're actually at a really high risk of getting into a criminal arena where they don't know where they're going to go. She does a lot of work on kind of breaking that cycle that can be put in there, so she's got some phenomenal stuff. Who else have I got? Now I feel like I'm forgetting really important people. So Joe O'Sullivan is coming with Rebecca Hawkins, and there's going to be a panel discussion with them. We've got Stephen Wildblood's play, so we're having a play at the conference, so it's not just going to be all lots of listening. We've also got the most beautiful venue, many breakout rooms, which means, because there's going to be a lot of information, there's a huge amount of information going to be shared, and I just went to a conference that was only half a day and I was exhausted. So we've got rooms that will be available also for people to just go and, you know, just chill and chat in. We've got lovely food. We've got the most beautiful people, and it is really, again, from, I suppose, that trauma informed, we're all slightly traumatized when we work in this area. We're taking a lot of worries from a lot of people, so actually just even having that ability just to speak to like-minded professionals that know what we deal with on a daily basis, and the secondary trauma that a lot of us carry, and how we can look after ourselves and help ourselves as legal professionals, as well as how we can do things better and educating ourselves, you know. So it's learning, it's supporting, it's feeling supported, it's eating lovely food and hanging out in a lovely venue. And we'll be in London, so it's going to be in Aldgate in London at a place called Events at number 6. So yeah, it's going to be great. We've got some really good people coming.
I'm really looking forward to it. But could you just summarize for what's going to be different about this event? What are particularly, whether it's lawyers or other mediators or financial experts, what are they going to take away from this that they're not getting at, say, to be blunt, the resolution conference?
I think what they're going to get is a real different perspective on how we can make a difference, a real understanding of what are the impacts of these things. You know, from like Bill Eddy and Megan Hunter talking about the impact of these things on children and how they behave. We're not only going to understand that, but we're then going to be able to understand how we can utilize that information to make what we're offering as professionals better skilled, upskilling what we're doing, working together, aligning our practices as best as we possibly can, moving more out of just the theory and into the practice of what is within the practice directions that stipulates it should be non-court dispute resolution at every opportunity, even when a case gets to court. This is what we should be doing, and not stuck in history of this is the quickest way to get these cases in and out of court, and the best way to do it, but really taking a human focus on how are we going to look after these people who are going through one of the most traumatic events of their life, and how are we going to do it well. And I think that's the difference, is we quite often zone into, and it's not just about the children. We're talking about parents, because if the parents aren't okay, the children are not okay. So it's about how we support them best, how we look after ourselves as professionals best, so we can offer that support to parents, so their parents can then be there in their best place for their children, and are knowledgeable, informed, and signposted to the right support. And of course, what better can you do than network with other like-minded professionals, where we are all working hopefully towards the same purpose. And if not, I would love to bring people in who aren't working towards that, so I can explain why they need to be moving towards a more child-focused and slightly different way of practicing.
Would you, tell me if I'm going kind of pushing this too far, but for me, it's not slightly different. I think what is happening through this way of working with the Amicable Divorce Network, where we work collaboratively, and we're keeping people out of court who otherwise would be doomed to the existing toxic divorce system that not only re-traumatizes the parents and their kids, but also the lawyers themselves in many cases.
And
Would that be like, am I over egging what we're
no,
doing here?
I mean, I think the thing is, Susie, is and my big thing is that people work in silos, and lots of people are doing this, wanting to make changes, but they're doing it in their own way, and we don't always see. So part of my bridging the gap, the thought behind it is bringing together those people who are already doing things well and making sure that they're sharing that information with others. Because ultimately, we've got, just off the top of my head, we've got Sir Andrew McFarlane, the head of the England Family Division. He is coming and he is saying none of these cases should be in court unless there are super serious safeguarding concerns as public law issues, or you genuinely have exhausted all possible options and you cannot find a resolution. He is saying they should not be in our courts. We've got Stephen Wildblood, an ex-judge. His work now is predominantly on why you shouldn't be in court. He's written the book, Anything But the Family Courts, right? Anything But the Family Courts. We've got Judge McFarlane, not Judge McFarlane. We've got Judge McCabe coming as well. So I'm currently working on a pilot project with her. She is a judge, and she is also saying these cases should not be in our courts. So yes, of course, there are a very, 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 very small minority of people who should be in the courts. That is there for a reason, and that is there for those cases specifically. But most of them, even if they shouldn't be out of the courts and in, for example, mediation, there should be at least a collaborative approach where they've got the support of mediators that can offer them more holistic support and signposting of other places that can offer holistic support than just the court system, because that on its own cannot provide sustainable solutions for families. So you're bringing together people whose job is the courts, who are saying these need to not be in court, right? So everyone is saying it shouldn't be here, but it's trying to cascade that information down through the lawyers, the barristers, the other professionals within, and into society. So society doesn't just automatically go, this is what we're separating, you need to fight. It shouldn't be you're separating, you need to fight. It should be we're separating, how are we going to find solutions to supporting our children, separating our finances, not let's fight to the death. Because why do we think that conflict is a solution? I mean, I might be different to many people, but if somebody disagreed with me on another matter, I wouldn't jump straight to, right, let's get in a fight, about it. I'd speak and say, these are the reasons why I feel how I do. Let me understand why you have the thoughts that you have that are different to mine, and let's find out if there's something that can balance between those two things. And if not, let's discuss if there's a different way. Let me really understand what's going on here, what your needs are, so we can find a solution. Because otherwise we're just shouting and saying the same thing over and over about what we want. I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this. And actually that's not helpful, because we need to know why do you want it, so we can find a solution that is usually different to the one that you think is the only solution. There are many solutions out there, and that's what we are trained to do as mediators, is collaboratively work with the parents to find solutions to their problems. And the courts are saying, we don't want you, we can't cope, the system's overwhelmed, we're not here, we have a blunt instrument to make a decision, but it's not going to fix all of the stuff that underpins a successful co-parenting relationship or a successful outcome for how you separate your finances. Everybody's shouting from the same page.
That sounds brilliant. And I know you're short of time, so I've just got two very quick questions. One is just to round off, because the way the Amicable Divorce Network works, certainly the way I've always worked as well, with clients, and this is, I'm sure, something that will come through the conference as well, is the fact that when you have that mediation, if for whatever reason you don't agree on everything, that doesn't mean you have to unravel everything and go to court. And this is a massive myth, which I really think is important for us to point out. What is the very fantastic thing that couple still keep control by agreeing on working with that person who is going to be the one to make a legally binding decision, which will keep them out of court and also take on board everything they have agreed with, which doesn't happen if they go to court.
Yeah. I mean, we need to empower people to be able to keep the decisions for themselves, and I think that goes without saying. And getting stuck and throwing your hands in the air and kind of saying, we've worked this hard to figure out what we're doing with this, that, and the other, but we're stuck on the pension share, or we're stuck on the proportion of equity that we're going to split, and throwing your hands in the air and saying, well, that's it, we can't decide on it, so let's just go to court, make a court decide, which is what people do. I see it all the time. Well, let's just take this to court. But the court is not there. They are not there. They absolutely don't want to hear you tit for tat. In all honesty, I probably don't necessarily want to hear you tit for tat, but I'll sit and listen, because actually understanding it helps me understand why somebody feels how they feel about the other person. But the court's absolutely not going to listen to it. They're not going to care. All they care about is it safe? Have we done our safeguarding checks? Have CAFCAS done their safeguarding interview? And okay, no worries, let's make a decision on the best that we can on the information we've given. But they're not going to help. They don't have the capacity, and they're not set up, designed to help with kind of the nuances and all of that. So yeah, I think we've just got to change this default of let's go to court. And I think the other thing is, people need to understand court isn't what it looks like on the TV. I situate myself in a court every week so that I can be a mediator on the outskirts for cases to be referred straight out to me. Out of court, go to mediation. We don't even want you in here. You need to go and deal with it outside. This shouldn't be here. I don't know how you've got here. But I've had clients say to me before, I want to take that person to court, and I'm going to bring all my family and friends so that I can show that this is what they've done. And I'm sitting there going, are you for real? Like, our courts are closed in the UK. You don't go in with anyone other than your solicitor if you've got a solicitor or your barrister. You can't just rock up and take your friends in there. That's not how it works. And people have this view that the court's going to listen to but he did this on this day and she did this on this day, and please decide. And you know what? How terrible that she did this and he did that. And they're like, no, the courts don't care. They do not care, because they don't have time to care. They only have time to do the basics, which is safety and what the law says. And that's it. They don't have anything else in them to say, oh, this feels like it's going to be ethical or anything else. They just go on the information they've got, and they are overworked, and they do not have the time. And the system doesn't have the money to keep the cases in for any longer than it is to get in, get out, job done.
So the alternative is that they can join together and choose a specialist arbitrator, who might be an arbitrator with children's matters, or it might be a specialist, much more specialist than they may get in the court with the judge. So they in the financial matters. And this is a key message that we need to get out, that mediation it makes it even more essential from my perspective, because as I explain to people, even if you don't agree on everything, you can keep the things you have agreed on, which is so vital, because nobody's imposed them on you. Some judge you've never met and doesn't know your family. And those bits that maybe you emotionally just can't decide on, you can hand those bits alone often over to a private judge who, because it's going to be a lot less expensive than barristers and solicitors and going to court, especially if you've done your homework
Hmm.
and you've kind of got all the right information together, so they're not going to
Yeah.
have to spend a long time. And they can either come in and decide on those particular areas, or if necessary, the whole thing. But you want to try as a parents to have had some things that you have both agreed on,
Hmm.
because as you were saying earlier on, it's that sense of being empowered rather than having things imposed upon you that I think is
Yeah.
so vital.
Hmm. And just to clarify as well, you talked about arbitration. So that anyone who doesn't know, when you go to court, as standard, it's a public arena. It's a public body. It's what our taxes pay for. It is a public arena, as in that's why there's such a long wait to get there, because the system is swamped. There's too many cases and there's not enough infrastructure for us to manage. The money's not there for us to plow through the cases as quick as we can, and time usually results in more conflict, which means more harm, and the cycle gets worse and worse and worse. When you're talking about private hearings, that's what you're talking about with an arbitrator, who is usually a judge, or someone of a similar level. But I think some barristers are qualified. Don't get me, I don't know the ins and outs, but
Yeah, no, they
essentially
are.
they are a private. It's a private hearing. You pay for it. It's done. You can have it done within a week. I was talking to someone just about it this morning. They didn't know there was even such a thing. So yes, the cost is going to be there, but it kind of is a cost. It's a big upfront cost as opposed to a protracted cost that's going to be there anyway, but it's just going to take a year for you to acquire the same cost, but you're going to also be emotionally wounded because of that time. So you're going to have a quicker outcome, a decision there and then. That decision is as empowered, as legally empowering as it would be in a court. And the other option is something like early neutral evaluation, which is someone who is experienced in the court and in outcomes from the court, who can come in and they are neutral. The whole point of it is they're neutral, so it's not aligning solicitors on each side. They come in and they say, if this was in court, this is the likely outcome. Of course, there's still going to be a small window of where that movement is, but they can say, you're not here and here anymore. This is the window that you're in, and that's where you need to make a decision.
And last but not least, so the last few minutes, you are on a mission to replace adversarial processes with compassion, humour and humanity. I
Yeah.
particularly like the humour bit. Could you just talk about
Yeah.
your approach to what most people just see as a very traumatic and terrifying process?
Yeah. I mean, I do like to think, I like to think I'm quite funny. But I think more so than anything, if you were to ask anyone about the service that they've had from our service, it would be, I'm sitting here now, I'm on my sofa. This is how I usually am when I'm mediating, because me being calm and relaxed means that someone else feels calm and relaxed. I'm not here to judge. I'm not here to make anyone feel uncomfortable. As soon as someone comes into a meeting with me, I will kind of note their body language and get on a level with where they are. Usually try and judge whether I can make a joke or whether it's completely inappropriate for me to do that. Don't always get it right. It's fallen flat sometimes. Lucy and I have many ways of dealing with stress, and some of them come from techniques from our clients. So I think that you have to. I think you have to take a human approach. I'm confident, know what I'm doing, and I know what the law is, and ultimately the rest of it is working through, like I would do with anyone else that I care about, how you're going to find a solution to this problem, and how we're going to keep the needs of the children, where there are children at the forefront, and where it's money, how we're going to protect your money in the best way possible, so there's as much of it left at the end of the fight as there can possibly be, without spending it all on different lawyers and barristers and everyone else that you might need, but you need them at a limited capacity,
Or possibly not at all in some cases.
or possibly not at all.
Outrageous though that may be to say. That was fantastic. Thank you so much, Katy, and I'm looking forward to catching up with you in person soon, and I'm really
Yes.
grateful for the time, and I will send you the links to wherever this has gone out, so that you
Wonderful.
can add links to your service that people can, so they can find you.
Lovely. Thank you so much for having me, Susie. I hope that was okay. I feel like I went off on many different tangents. You probably tell I'm quite passionate about
I can
the
tell.
changes that need to be made. So hopefully that's come across. And people can try and dilute my diversity, and kind of understand the key point, which is, you know, keep everything where you can, keep the control, because out of control is like COVID all over again with your divorce. And what we want to do is keep that control, keep the control with our children, and you know, no one needs more conflict in their life. No one needs more hurt than they've already got when they're already going through a traumatic event. They need to be supported, and they need to feel empowered to make decisions and keep control of those decisions. And that's what we're here to do.
Thank you. Perfect out.
No worries.
See you soon.
Thank you. Thank you.